For round one, 26 cars appeared under the hot South African sun. It was soon clear that the teams that finished strongly in 1992 were still the main contenders, and the outsiders remained outsiders. Prost promptly showed that he'd lost none of his skills, and he dominated qualifying from the outset. Schumacher kept his 1992 momentum going and was always near the top, securing third starting position. But Prost's new teammate Damon Hill, whose career was only 2 races old in Formula One, had several spins, but he emerged fourth fastest. Schumacher was a little surprised by the pace of Senna and his new McLaren, especially since the Brazilian's car was powered by an earlier version of the Ford V8 engine than in the Benetton. For many, finding a limit on the dusty Kyalami track was a problem. So, first pole position of the season to Prost, but Senna was less than 1/10 of a second slower. Senna outdragged Prost at the start, and so did Hill. But in the second bend, the Englishman's race was to go very wrong. Andretti's Formula One debut started even worse. He stalled at the start, along with Comas and De Cesaris. Hill never really recovered from that spin and was removed from the race completely by Alessandro Zanardi in an optimistic passing attempt. After several tries, Prost managed to pass Senna into the first corner. Hill absorbed the lesson. But Schumacher also had a lot to learn. His go at Senna ended in tears. Schumacher's new teammate Riccardo Patrese completed a bad day for Benetton, spinning out from third place, underlying Briton Mark Blundell his first podium finish. In the closing laps, the track was soaked by a proper monsoon, which took many by surprise. And as the checkered flag came out for Alain Prost, others were in trouble, and Footwork's Derek Warwick crashed out of 6th place. For Senna and Prost, there were no surprises. They'd finished where they were expected to, at the top. The Brazilian race started traditionally with the popular bicycle race, and it was dominated by the Sauber driver, JJ Leto. When the four-wheeled machines came out, everything was back to normal. The Williamses were on their own, with Prost fastest and Hill securing second grid position. Schumacher was still slower than Senna, Andretti improved, but Johnny Herbert had his own problems. Ivan Capelli was slowest of all. Schumacher spun. And Gerhard Berger was lucky to escape from this enormous crash in his Ferrari. But all this was of little importance for the local fans who had eyes for one man only. At the start, Andretti's difficult Formula One baptism continued with another shunt, this time involving Berger as well. Miraculously, both were uninjured. Martin Brundle was out second later in a separate crash. But with all the dramas behind, Prost led the race ahead of Senna, but the local man was soon passed by Hill, only to find his old ally, the heavens, on his side again. Midway through the race, the tropical shower came. Prost didn't survive it, among others. As the rain stopped, Hill was the first to change from wet to dry tyres. Senna soon followed suit and began his charge. The Williams driver in his fourth race played it safe and didn't oppose the Brazilian, and the fans loved it. In the dying laps, Schumacher, recovering after a hectic race, passed Herbert for third, but all that mattered was Senna, and only his second win at home in 10 years. The fastest cars on Earth returned to Donington for the first time in more than 50 years. History was present everywhere, not least in the Museum of Racing Cars within the circuit. The event was, however, marked by even more bad weather. England was in typical English April mode, and many didn't like it much. Schumacher was only one of the stars who blotted his notebook. Not surprisingly, Hill was more than keen to show well at home, but once again had to admit that Prost was still faster, at least during qualifying. Saubers did well. In only the team's third race, Wendlinger qualified fifth and Leto seventh. It was Andretti who separated them, but not without his usual problems. For Alesi, Donington was taking some learning. Senna was this time a fraction slower than Schumacher, but a full second and a half behind Prost's fastest time. As the royal family turned up on the race day, Senna's mood was getting better and better. It was raining again. The Brazilian's first lap was phenomenal. He passed the four cars in front of him and opened up a healthy lead. Once ahead of the Williamses, he wouldn't be threatened again for the rest of the afternoon. Andretti was his usual self, this time collecting Wendlinger. It was a race of almost 70 pit stops. The rain stopped and started several times, turning team strategy into a farce. Schumacher was an early victim of the rain. But the young Brazilian, Rubens Barrichello, relished it and ran as high as second for a while. Senna was giving the McLaren mechanics plenty of work to do. Most of it under the watchful eye of Princess Diana. Prost led for 5 laps after one of Senna's stops, but that was all he could do. Warwick walked home, and Prost lost more time by stalling his engine during one of 7 stops. On one of Senna's stops, he didn't stop. Barrichello's fine race was ruined by a lack of fuel 6 laps from the end. But it was Senna's day. He won easily and was now 12 points ahead of Prost in the championship. Imola is Ferrari land, and even the lack of form of the red cars couldn't stop thousands of tifosi turning up to support their drivers. As an aperitif, they could watch some of the Formula One stars on a soccer pitch. But it was Senna everyone was talking about on Friday morning. Still racing on a race-by-race basis, he arrived at the circuit literally at the last minute after flying overnight from Brazil. And it showed. In qualifying, he was only 4th fastest, again slower than Schumacher. Prost was fastest again, but Hill was getting closer every time. The two were separated by only 1/10 of a second. Everybody else, led by Schumacher, was almost 2 seconds behind. Alesi and Berger were still struggling. but at least the Ferraris were in the top 10. The start was wet, and Hill outsprinted his team leader down to the Tamburello corner. Blundell didn't last long, smashing his Ligier into the wall. Hill kept his lead, despite this little hiccup, until the track dried and the pit stop started. Prost's answer to recent criticism of his wet weather driving was this superb manoeuvre. He passed both Senna and Hill in a single stroke and was never touched again. Senna went by Hill too, finding time to criticise the Englishman's driving. Andretti's race ended prematurely once again, but at least he'd survived 32 laps this time. He was joined by Hill, pushed aside by an increasing brake problem. Senna lost his second place when his hydraulics expired, and Zanardi crashed his Lotus with fiery results. But none of this affected Prost, who was back on his winning ways. For the Larousse team, Alio's fifth place at the end meant as much as a win. Almost unnoticed in the race this time, Schumacher made up for it with his podium champagne extravaganza with our cameraman. After 4 wet races, it rained in sunny Spain on the Thursday before the race, but from Friday, the weather was perfect. Perfect for Williamses. Hill was fast, but again, not fast enough to match Prost. Schumacher had his problems and was consistently slower than Senna during qualifying. But Prost was in a class of his own again, despite this unusual moment on Friday. While Prost somehow kept running, his teammate did it properly on Saturday morning. This ruined his chances of preparing the car properly for the afternoon, and perhaps he lost his first pole position then and there. At the start, Prost again failed to capitalise on his pole position. But wheel to wheel into the first corner, he did keep Senna out of second place. A dozen laps later, he outbraked Hill, took the lead, and looked set for another easy win. Martin Brundle, meanwhile, negotiated the same corner somewhat less perfectly. But Prost was not having an easy run. Hampered by bad vibrations, he'd almost lost the lead when Damon Hill's engine blew up. Senna took the second spot despite this lengthy tyre change. Hill was comforted by his wife Georgie, and Schumacher had to take the long way round Zanardi's crippled Lotus. Despite those vibrations, Prost duly took another conclusive win. Senna kept his second, but the broadest smile was Andretti's. He'd finally finished fifth. And Prost now led the championship table by 2 points from Senna. Well, Prost may have won the last 2 races, but Formula One was now back in Monte Carlo, and one man has been almost unbeatable around the tiny street circuit in the past decade, winning a record equalling 5 times: Ayrton Senna. But Senna's task would not be easy this time. Schumacher was driving with more and more assurance, his Benetton now equipped with traction control. On Saturday, the German secured his first front-row start of the year. Almost inevitably, it was Prost who was on pole. The Frenchman hadn't won Monaco since 1988 and was keen to build on his championship lead over Senna. Teammate Damon Hill, son of Monaco five-time winner Graham, excelled on Thursday, but on Saturday he had all sorts of problems. He ended up fourth fastest behind Senna. For once, Prost wasn't slow at the start. In fact, he was a little too fast, and he paid dearly for it. Blundell also paid for starting disastrously and was nudged off the track by Ukio Katayama's Tyrrell. In the opening laps of the race, Prost was in commanding mood, gradually extending his lead. But he was then called in to pay for that jump start with a stop-go penalty. But it was stop and no-go for almost a full lap. All his chances of winning were destroyed, and a faulty clutch was later named the culprit. Prost's drama handed the lead to Schumacher, but it all ended in fire and smoke on lap 33. So the lead passed to Senna. Ferraris were finally on form and Berger threatened to take Hill's place until he made an ill-judged move in the Lowe's hairpin and ended his race. Hill was able to restart to finish second. And the frustration in the Ferrari camp was eased by Alesi's third place at the end. So Senna won in Monaco for the 6th time. Nobody has ever done that before. And nobody really objected that this was probably the luckiest of his wins. The Brazilian was back on top of the championship table, 5 points ahead of Prost, who at the end finished 4th. Keen fisherman Barbazza always likes Montreal. And everyone else in Formula One finds plenty to do around the track. The tight Villeneuve circuit needs good power and good brakes. The Benettons qualified 3rd and 4th, then came the Ferraris, with Berger 5th ahead of birthday boy Alesi. But the Williams duo were again untouchable, with Prost taking his 7th pole in as many races. Senna had his worst qualifying for years and was only 8th. On Sunday, there were more problems for Andretti. He was left stranded on the grid and had to start 3 laps late. Schumacher fluffed his start completely and was passed by half the field by the first bend. Hill was once again faster than Prost and took the lead. Senna started sensationally, and by the end of the first lap he was 4th after this hair-raising duel with Jean Alesi. 6 laps into the race, Prost passed Hill at the hairpin. And Hill's day was further spoiled after a routine tyre stop turned completely bad. The team was simply not ready for him. Ayrton Senna's stop and Alain Prost's both went much better, and they both kept their first 2 places. This time the Williams mechanics were determined to get it right. But Senna lost 6 good points when he retired with faulty electrics 7 laps before the end. So Prost scored his 4th win of the year and once again took the lead in the championship. Schumacher was a very happy second. But the happiest of them all seemed to be Barbazza. Between the races in Canada and France, the racing world was shocked by the death of 1976 world champion James Hunt. In Manicourt, the biggest news was the arrival at Ferrari of the former Peugeot sports director Jean Todt. Under his expert guidance, Ferrari was finally expected to emerge from its 3-year-long crisis. Damon Hill finally beat Prost to secure his first ever pole position. The Frenchman didn't look too upset. Senna, on the other hand, was unhappy with 5th on the grid, and Andretti, 16th, was almost desperate. But Ligier were delighted. They filled the second row, Martin Brundle this time faster than Marc Blundell. At the start, Hill was his usual self and this time benefited from his pole. He took the lead easily, followed by Prost and the Ligiers. The Briton kept the lead until the mandatory tyre stops midway through the race. Delayed by traffic in the pit lane, Hill's stop turned out to be slower than Prost's. This was enough to give the Frenchman the lead he so badly wanted in his home Grand Prix. Immediately after Prost's stop, Hill did try to take the lead back, but then he decided to settle for second. Martin Brundle lost a possible podium finish after he had to stop for tyres for a second time, and this lost him a lot of time. Meanwhile, Michael Schumacher's Ford-powered Benetton finally managed to pass Senna's Ford-powered McLaren for the first time this season on track, to take 3rd place. So Prost and Hill had their demonstration run towards the end, with Hill following the Professor home. For the Frenchman, it was yet another popular home win. In England, the locals are used to the weather. Hill, Herbert, Warwick, Brundle and Blundell know all about wet weather racing. But it was Ayrton Senna who was again expected to shine on a wet track. Marc Blundell got it all wrong during Friday qualifying and then had the scare of his life when the 2 McLarens arrived. But the most popular man in Silverstone was, inevitably, Damon Hill. Schumacher tried too hard to match Senna this time. He crashed and had to make do with 4th on the grid behind the Brazilian. Damon Hill was all set for pole and was already celebrating. So was his wife. But then, in the dying qualifying minutes, Prost spoiled the party by taking his 8th pole of the year. As usual, the pole didn't help Prost to take the lead at the start. What's more, he also succumbed to Senna going into the first bend. Andretti was also his usual self, flying off the road at once. Senna and Prost fought a memorable battle before Prost finally got by. And by the time he did so, Hill was already 8 seconds ahead. Senna was then targeted by Schumacher for several laps, until the German was able to repeat Prost's treatment and take third place. Prost closed the gap to Hill, but never seriously looked like taking the lead. And Hill stayed ahead during the brief appearance of the safety car. But then his dream of winning at home and his engine went up in smoke. And Senna retired from third place on the last lap for the 3rd year running. So Prost stayed out of trouble and duly snatched another win. Formula One's next stop was Hockenheim, the circuit where an engine's power is more essential than anywhere else. Even though Michael Schumacher didn't have the all-important Renault power behind his shoulders, local fans packed the stands in anticipation. Qualifying was as usual more difficult for some than it was for others. But everybody made sure that every bit of computer information was understood and every nut was properly tightened. Schumacher couldn't do much about the Williamses, but again he was fastest of the rest. And Prost once again outqualified Hill by a tenth. Prost made his usual bad start and was immediately passed by Hill and Schumacher. When Senna tried the same in the first chicane, the two touched and the Brazilian spun. He restarted, but dead last. As Hill and Schumacher powered away, Brundle spun behind Prost, and trying to avoid each other, both ended up in the escape road. Andretti retired early on after colliding with Berger. Prost recovered quickly and soon passed Schumacher for second place. But another stop-go penalty awaited him for that escape road infringement. Meanwhile, Berger and Blundell, fighting for what was to be third place, had some hair-raising moments. Prost continued, and this time he didn't stall his engine. Hill had built a solid lead and looked set for his first win when just 2 laps from the flag, his left rear tyre disintegrated. Once again, Prost had been given a win on a plate. Schumacher finished second, much to his own delight, and the fans also loved it. But it was Prost who was probably happiest of all. It was his 7th win of the year. As the teams drove into Hungary and to the tight circuit just north of Budapest, everyone was wondering when Damon Hill would finally win his first Grand Prix. He had obviously matured into a potential winner, and only cruel luck had deprived him of taking the last 2 races. Would the Hungaroring bring him a change of luck? Just before the start, Prost's hard-earned pole position was lost when he stalled his engine as the field moved off on the final warm-up lap. He would have to start from the back of the pack. Not only did this make things easier for Hill, who'd been second fastest in qualifying, but it also made Prost's own chances of winning very slim indeed, for this is a notoriously difficult circuit on which to overtake. At the start, Hill grabbed his chance immediately and took a clear lead. Schumacher also made a good start, but then went wide into the first corner and lost several places. Hill was evidently in a class of his own, effortlessly pulling away from Senna, and the Brazilian was pulling away from everybody else. Schumacher then proved his bravery and passed Berger, of all people, on the outside of the first corner. But the German spoiled everything by spinning off 3 corners later. Alesi did considerably worse, but escaped only mildly shaken from this moment. Berger used every trick in the book, this time with Martin Brundle, to take an eventual 3rd place. And after Schumacher retired with a blown engine, Riccardo Patrese salvaged 2nd place, a season best for Benetton. So Hill romped home to win. 24 years after his father Graham scored his last Grand Prix victory in Monaco, Damon scored his first. Spa is very much a Schumacher favourite. He won his first Grand Prix here last year. Senna made sure that Gerhard Berger would remember his birthday cake. Everyone wondered whether Schumacher could win again on this wonderful circuit. But Spa can be cruel. On Friday morning, Alessandro Zanardi had a colossal accident. Miraculously, the Italian was not seriously injured. Senna then arrived at the scene of the accident far too quickly for comfort, despite the yellow flags being waved. Later, he had some explaining to do. As usual, Prost dominated the rest of qualifying and clocked his 11th pole position. The footworks finally started to work well. Warwick and Suzuki qualified 7th and 6th. But the Ferrari hard times continued. Berger's car caught fire in the pit lane, and Alesi was left stranded out on the circuit. Schumacher's race started badly, as a clutch problem almost forced him to stall on the line. Somehow, he kept going, but only after almost everyone had passed him. Senna, on the contrary, made a good start again, and lined up behind the surprising leader, Prost. But Senna succumbed to Hill's power as soon as lap 2. And Schumacher was making frantic progress further down the field. Senna made an early tyre stop, and the inevitable clash between the Benetton and McLaren stars almost ended in tears when, after this stop, Senna forced Schumacher onto the grass, leaving the pits. But somehow the German forced his way through. It was Prost's turn this time to have a slightly slower pit stop, even by Williams' not brilliant standards. And as he went out of the pits, Hill was approaching. Down the hill, Hill ruthlessly flashed by, never to be approached again. In fact, Prost also had to give way to the aggressive Schumacher on the very next lap. But there was nothing the German could do about Hill. Georgie could celebrate again. And Damon was obviously getting used to the taste of victory. The Italians love soccer, and they love skiing, but at Monza they love Ferrari best. There were new faces at Monza, Marco Apicella for Boutsen at Jordan, and Portuguese star Pedro Lamy for Zanardi at Lotus. A new Ilmor engine at Sauber. And Michael Andretti having his final Grand Prix. But Prost on pole position was no news. At the end of qualifying, Ferraris were the main story. Berger emerged unhurt from this little misunderstanding with his own teammate, Jean Alesi. At the start, Prost managed to grab the lead, but Senna triggered a series of troubles when, going down to the first chicane, he tripped over Damon Hill's rear wheel. Damon managed to keep going, albeit on the grass, but 5 cars, including both Footworks and both Jordans, were eliminated. As Prost calmly led the rest of the field, Andretti again compromised his race early on. This time he would recover and finish on the podium. Schumacher made some enemies around the track when he passed Alesi for second place soon after the start. And Hill, who dropped back to 8th after the initial hiccup, was on his way back and passed Berger in the process. Senna thought he was on his way back as well, until this happened. The innocent victim was Martin Brundle. Hill passed Alesi for 3rd. And it became 2nd after Schumacher's engine expired in an expensive way on lap 22. With 5 laps to go, Prost was ready for another win, but now it was his turn to have rotten luck. Hill was very close anyway, and he took over the victory. But the excitement wasn't over yet. This was how Christian Fittipaldi finished 8th. And Alesi and Ferrari finally finished 2nd, and it showed. Mika Häkkinen's prayers were answered at Estoril. Andretti's departure had promoted him from test driver to Senna's number 2.
It's also a little bit lucky also, you know, just
you need something like that.
Schumacher wasn't happy during qualifying. This was one of 4 spins over the 2 days.
En Formule 1, après le Grand Prix d'Adélaïde 93.
The big news of Friday was Alain Prost's announcement. At the end of the season, he would retire. But in his efforts to earn pole, he made a rare mistake. So Damon Hill took his 2nd pole of the year. And cheeky Mika Häkkinen beat Senna for 3rd on the grid. At the start, Hill stalled his engine as the field moved off on the final warm-up lap. He would have to start from the back of the pack. At the green light, Häkkinen drove all the way round Prost, but Alesi drove round both of them. And it was a Ferrari in the lead. Damon Hill was already coming through from the back. But Senna wouldn't be a threat to Alesi for long. His engine blew on lap 19. No points for Ayrton today. On the same lap, both Alesi and Häkkinen were in for tyres. As Schumacher and Prost went by, they came out again to fight over third place. It was a fierce and bitter battle, but Alesi used the Ferrari's power to block every move that Häkkinen made. De Cesaris arrived for tyres only just in control. And Häkkinen finally put a wheel wrong, and his race was over. Gerhard Berger came storming out of the pits and lost it in a big way. How did Comas, Warwick and Leto miss him? Schumacher still had the lead, but Prost still had a championship to win. Pedro Lamy left his home Grand Prix backwards. And Prost had to let Schumacher go to score Benetton's first win of the year. It was the second win of the young German's career, and surely not the last. But Prost's second place had clinched his fourth World Championship title. And Damon Hill had come through to take third. Ever since his Honda days, Ayrton Senna has been very popular in Japan. But the public's attention was also caught by some new faces. Eddie Irvine was the latest Jordan recruit. Local hero Toshio Suzuki joined Larousse instead of regular Philippe Alliot, while Frenchman Jean-Marc Gounon replaced Christian Fittipaldi at Minardi. At Ferrari, nothing new. Jean Alesi having another accident on Saturday morning, but he was uninjured. But later that day, Gerhard Berger finally reminded us of his glory days by holding pole position for a while. Eventually he finished only fifth fastest, but Ferrari was clearly on the way back. It was Prost who again spoiled the party with his 13th pole position of the season. Whatever advantage Prost had had in qualifying, he lost immediately at the start when Senna passed him into the first corner. Schumacher made a slowish start and found himself briefly behind the startling debutant Irvine. Hill also started badly, but was soon fighting back. He passed Schumacher by sheer power on lap 8. Passing Berger proved less easy, and the victim of this tangle turned to be the closely following Schumacher. Senna held command of the race until the tyre stops, when Prost went in front. But then it started to rain, and Senna was able to glide past Prost to retake the lead. When the McLaren driver came up to lap Damon Hill and Eddie Irvine, who were fighting over 6th place, he found the Jordan driver in a less than supportive mood. Irvine fought back and repassed Senna under braking. The whole drama was spiced involuntarily by Martin Brundle, who lost a wheel just as Hill, Irvine and Senna arrived to lap him. Senna was not exactly thrilled to be involved in a fierce battle, actually taking place one lap behind him. Patrese crashed heavily on lap 46. and Irvine pushed Warwick out of the way to 6th place 3 laps later. Pedro Lamy survived another crash 4 laps before the flag. But the day belonged to Senna and McLaren's boss, Ron Dennis. The two of them forgot all their recent misunderstandings in an emotional embrace after the race. Irvine was pleased with himself as well, but he was yet to meet Ayrton Senna.
Remember, Damon, here's my advice to Damon, it's only a game, Damon.
Traditionally, Adelaide's race marks the end of a long, hard season, and everybody is always in a relaxed mood.
Very weird. Yeah. Wait till it gives you a kiss.
The Ferrari drivers found out that the new speed of their cars also brought some new worries. Senna, however, relished the tricky street track and posted his first pole position of the year. Prost, about to start his last ever race, was half a second slower this time and worried. Starting his last race for McLaren from pole position, Senna went straight into the lead on the green light, ahead of Prost, Hill and the rest. Behind them there was a tangle, and poor Pedro Lamy once again finished his race prematurely. With Senna, during the tyre stops, Prost was in the lead for 5 laps. But when he stopped, Senna was back in front. And from now on, Senna's farewell race for McLaren was going to go the Brazilian's way. Häkkinen's day was spoiled when he retired with brake trouble. And Leto's final race for Sauber ended like this. Hill almost passed his team leader towards the end of the race after an inspired drive, but then spoiled everything with this spin. But he kept his engine running and restarted to finish third. No problems for Senna, he won again. This was McLaren's 104th Grand Prix win. It put the Woking team ahead of Ferrari at the top of the all-time list. And on the podium, all the quarrels from the past between the sport's two greatest champions seemed to be forgotten for once. The season could not have ended on a better note. So, at the end of a long, hard season, in the Constructors' Championship, it was Lotus Ford, a hard-trying 6th. Ligier Renault, 5th, in their best year in recent times. Ferrari, 4th, and surely on the way back now from the doldrums. Benetton Ford, 3rd, and disappointed not to be top Ford team this year. McLaren, thanks to Senna's genius, an impressive 2nd. And Williams Renault, world champions again, with double the points of their nearest rival. In the Drivers' Championship, Jean Alesi's never-say-die style deserved better than 6th place. Riccardo Patrese was a somewhat subdued 5th. And his teammate Michael Schumacher, a strong and always stylish 4th. For Damon Hill, a superb 3rd place in his first full season. For Ayrton Senna, 5 victories and a richly deserved 2nd place. And for the 4th time, the world champion, Alain Prost.